What's going on, everybody? So Tiger stuff, we will be talking about the Tiger stuff come Sunday, but I wanted to make an extra video this week because today the MLB announced some massive rule changes that are going to come and affect the 2023 season. Now, remember during the lockout that there was a big discussion that the MLB wanted to be able to make rule changes and implement new things a lot faster for this upcoming year. It was part of the collective bargaining agreement and whatnot. So over today, the competition committee, they agreed to some rule changes. We're going to get in on every single one of them. So the first one is not that big of a deal. The bases are going from 15 square inches to 18 square inches. And a lot of this has to do with is they're trying to encourage more people to steal. And it protects the first baseman a little bit more because you get 2 more inches. And, I mean, if you could still slide into second, it would help the second baseman, too. And it still can help a second baseman to a sense because guys can slide in through the bag at second base. But we've seen that called a couple of times this year for interference, even though it was a clean slide. It happened to the Tigers once, too. But neither here nor there. It helps the first baseman, keep him a little bit more out of harm's way, a little bit less chance to get spiked, a little bit more of a, I guess you would call, a pathway to swipe back at a runner and whatnot. So that's more of a safety rule, and it encourages stealing because 2 inches is 2 inches. The next rule is the pickoff rule and the clock. So a lot of people are losing their minds over this because they said baseball shouldn't have a clock, and baseball is the only sport without a clock. Okay, you got to realize something here. Pitchers are taking way too long to throw the ball in between pitches, and hitters are just as guilty because they stride up to the plate. They got to let their walk-up song play, and they take so much time in between pitches. For example, the MLB posted a graphic of it took a minor league pitcher 19 seconds to throw, 1 minute and 19 seconds to throw 5 pitches. They proceeded to show another MLB game. I forget the two. It was between the Indians, the Guardians, and I forget the other team, the opposing team. But it was late inning. It was a reliever, and it took him 1 minute and 56 seconds to throw 5 pitches. It's been shown. It's been proven. This is shaving off as much as 26 minutes per game in the minor leagues. My own personal experience. This past year, I can honestly say I have watched probably between 25 and 30 Mud Hens games because I watched almost every single game that Riley Green had played down there when he was coming back from his broken foot, and I watched quite a few when Spencer Torkelson was on his way back up to the big leagues when he got demoted. So I have seen quite a few minor league games. 25, 30 games gives you a good consensus of what's going on. And last year I went to a game when Green, Torkelson, Kreidler all got called up to AAA, and I seen it in person. First off, you don't even notice that it's there. It's flawlessly implemented. You don't even notice that it's there. And the guys that have been playing with this now for the last couple of years, it's not even a thing. They're so used to it, and it's become so ingrained in their everyday getting ready to get in the box. They know they have to be ready by 8 seconds. The pitchers know the difference. You got to have 14 seconds with no runners on, 20 seconds with runners on. So it's going to be, there's going to be a for sure adjustment period because you're going to have all these veteran players that have been in the big leagues 5, 10, 12 years that have never played with this pitch clock, and they're going to have to get used to it. I mean, I can only imagine if David Ortiz played in today's modern day and age game where he came up, he had to spit in his hands, clap twice, mess with his gloves and whatnot like that. It's going to take some guys to get used to it, and they're going to get a strike put on them. Zach Short on the Compound podcast was talking about the pitch clock. He actually got rung up on a strike 3 because he wasn't ready, because he wasn't ready by the 8-second mark, and he was talking about the pitch clock. Well, the following week he comes back on the Compound podcast and talks about how much he likes the pitch clock because of the speed and the pace of the game. It makes the pace better. Now, from my experience watching it, I was watching a Tigers game and a Mud Hens game in tandem. The Mud Hens game started 10 minutes later than the Tigers game. I think the Tigers game started at 7:08, and the Mud Hens game started at 7:20. The Mud Hens game, by the time it was in the 7th inning, the Tigers were only in the bottom of the 4th. I'm not exaggerating. This legitimately happened. The pace of play, the speed of the game, is right where it needs to be. Now, I consider myself a baseball history buff. I love baseball from all generations. I have watched, in the offseason, I watched so many games from different decades. Like yesterday, I was watching a game from 1978 because Lou Whitaker and Alan Trammell were 22 years old, and they were just over a year in the big leagues. I think that was so cool to watch. I've watched games from the 50s. I've watched Game 6 of the 52 World Series. I've watched Game 6 of the 58 World Series. I've watched Game 7 of the 66 World Series. I've watched the 68 World Series. I've watched so many World Series highlight videos from all the way from the 50s, hell, even back in the 30s and 40s for the Tigers ones, all the way through today. I've watched games from basically, I have watched so many games from the earliest televised ones they have from the 50s to now. I've been watching the game since 2003, die-heartedly, because, I'm about to be 31. 2003, I was like 12 years old. That was when I fell in love with the game. My point being this is seeing the different decades of baseball and seeing how it's been played and the transitions from decade to decade to decade. The pace of play and the normality of the game is no longer like it was. I can remember, even in my lifetime, being only 30 years old, having almost watched baseball for 20 years now. The pace is not like it was when I was a kid. I just the other day watched the 2005 Futures game because I wanted to see Justin Verlander pitch. One of his very first times pitching at Comerica Park. And that game, now mind you, the commercials were cut. That game was an hour and 38 minutes. There was guys making contact within 3 pitches, and I think there was maybe 5 strikeouts between the two teams. If I had to put a pitch clock between the both teams, I would be willing to bet $100 right now that the average pitch time between each team combined was no more than 14 seconds. If you go and watch games from the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, hell, even 90s. I was watching a game the other day where Greg Maddux pitched a complete game against the Cubs. That game, guaranteed no more than 14 pitches, 14 seconds in between pitches. And the hitters were ready to go right away. So it's not so much that we're changing the game to make it worse and we're changing the game, to try to cater to other fans. Because, that is kind of the case because they're trying to get younger. They don't want as many. They're trying to make their demographic, younger instead of the average age of an MLB fan being 56 years old. But what they're trying to do is they're trying to make baseball more like baseball used to be. It's not that Rob Manfred's ruining baseball. It's not that the competition committee is ruining baseball. It's not that they're trying to change something that has been such a stoic game and so many people love and so many people want to keep the same. They're trying to make it like it used to be. This pace, what we're used to, what's become commonality, this is not how baseball used to be. These games didn't used to be almost 3.5 hours, 4 hours long. This game didn't used to be just 3 true outcomes. This game didn't used to be where everyone shifts so much it's like robots out there. You're taking the athleticism away. You're taking away seeing your best players make the best plays. You're taking away the excitement of the game because guys are ripping balls at 105 and it's right at the rover in the outfield like they're playing softball. This is what they're trying to get back from. They're trying to make baseball like baseball used to be. It's not that they're trying to ruin it. It's not that they're trying to change the game. It's not that they're trying to make anything drastically different. These are the changes that need to be made to make the game more like it used to be. If you go watch some of these games from the 50s, the 60s, go watch World Series films all the way from the 50s and up. The pace of play, the way guys got in the box, how fast the pitchers would get the ball and throw it. The guys would stay in the box. They wouldn't do a million things and do 100 rituals and stuff like that. This is how the game used to be played. This is what it used to be. So the changes were necessary. It needed to go back to that. Because me, almost having 20 years watching this sport, as closely as I follow the Tigers, as closely as I follow baseball, it's just not as good as it used to be. I was watching a game from 2006 this past year. Justin Verlander it was a game from August. They were playing the Tampa Bay Rays. And you go back and watch those games. You don't see anything like that nowadays. I was watching this game with my girlfriend, and I'm like, watch what Placido Polanco's going to do. Didn't even remember the game. I'm like, I bet you $20 he's going to try to shoot a ball down the first base line because there was a runner on first. What did he do? He got a double down the line in a hit and run to make the tying run score. You don't see that anymore. You don't see guys hit and run. You don't see guys try to get the runner over. We had a game in L.A. the other day. Eric Haas gets a leadoff double after the Tigers were down a singular run. They couldn't even get him over to third. Strikeout, flyout. And a lot of it has to do with the current status of the game and how it's being played. The shifts getting banned. Let's touch on this right now. A lot of people go, well, why couldn't guys just adjust and hit the ball the other way? Listen, I'm going to keep going, referring back to games that I've watched in my lifetime and just on YouTube. The game was played for 100 years where, yes, there's always been some kind of shifts. You had the Lou Boudreau shift against Ted Williams. There's always been some kind of a shift, but they were minuscule. I can remember for the longest time that shifts weren't that common. You only saw them every so once in a while, and I apologize for touching the camera. People are texting me on my phone. It's so annoying. Anyways, I can remember for the longest time that shifts weren't that common. I remember when the Rays started doing that, and everyone started losing their mind. They're like, I can't believe Joe Madden is playing a 5-man infield. I can't believe Joe Madden has 4 players in the outfield. It was something that you just did not see that often. And then it came to be about, I would say, the mid-2010s. The Rays started doing it a whole bunch. And then all of a sudden the Astros started copycatting them with Lunau. And then all of a sudden when those guys started doing it and they seen how many outs that they were stealing because they had rovers playing there. They had an extra guy in the infield. They seen how good the analytics and the spray charts and the StatCast came about. The whole game changed. It revolutionized. It changed. It went from teams that would go, okay, we're going to shade this guy a certain direction in the outfield and have our infielders playing at a certain which way, to where it completely changed it, to where now you get these guys, they don't have to be defenders anymore. You don't have to have athleticism to play your position. I mean, yeah, you're going to see the occasional play like we see from Javier Baez, make awesome sliding plays, stuff like that, but you don't see it on the regular because you got 4 guys on one side. It's like when I used to play softball. You would have the guy always out in the middle. You'd have your 4 outfielders, and then you would have the one guy either rovering in center or rovering in left, depending on who the hitter was and where his was. And you just give him the whole left side infield because it was just easy way to steal outs. Easy way to steal outs. And that's what the game became, and it's absolutely ruined it. And what it's done is now it's created all this 3 true outcomes stuff. I can't watch this stuff anymore where everyone is trying to hit home runs because they don't want. The whole premise of the shift is if you have a guy like David Ortiz, you don't give a shit if he hits the ball down the left field line for a single. Because you know he's probably not going to score a double because he was slow as shit, or get a double because he was slow as shit. You don't care if he gets a single. You don't care if, like, when Victor Martinez bunted down the line. That's fine. You just rewarded them for using the shift because you got a guy that can put the ball in the seats. You got a guy that does damage. You got a guy that you got to be scared of in the lineup. And what did he do? He gave himself up for a lousy single to put himself on. Now, the other hitters in the lineup that you're not as worried about because you got this guy on base that you were worried about by giving him the whole side of an infield to get a single is now on base. It doesn't matter to teams. So what did the guys start to do to counteract the shift? They started swinging up more. The whole launch angle thing came about. And guys started trying to hit balls into the seats. Now, mind you, the paydays were nicer because, you know, with the whole launch angle thing, all of a sudden the home run rate went up. Like a lot. Because guys are getting paid to hit home runs. The offense went up. Guys are getting paid because the home runs are starting to fly to historic pace. And the juice ball didn't hurt either. But they're getting paid more. And so now, not only are they getting rewarded for 3 true outcomes, it's beating the shift. And teams aren't really asking guys to hit and run. Teams don't really care about strikeouts anymore. And they're rewarding you if you have a good on base. You could literally hit 220 with a 400 on base and you hit 35 home runs. That's a great year for them. They don't care. That's perfectly fine. And what it's done is it's made the game less exciting. So with the shifts being banned, now defenders have to be defenders again. The way the game was played for over 100 years where you had 2 guys on each side of second base. You had all the guys on the infield. You didn't have softball rovers out there. It's back to being like how it should be. And what it needs to be to make the game better. Listen, it's going to suck. This is going to hurt. Whatever team you're a fan of, it's going to hurt your team because now those easy outs where a guy rips a ball 100 mile an hour off the bat and they hit it to the softball rover, It's now a clean single again. And that's going to bring up offense. And that's going to cost some teams some games because all these teams that for the longest time, they have all this analytical data, all this stuff about all the StatCast data, all the spray charts, and they could literally put players in the most perfect positions based off of spray charts. And the guys didn't have to be as good of defenders because they didn't need as much range because they're basically putting you in the best spot to succeed. Teams are going to have to now have guys that can defend. Teams are going to now have to have guys that have range again, that have athleticism again, because they're not going to be able to sit there and shift them like they were. Now, I think there's still going to be some kind of shifts. Teams are eventually going to figure out the best way to counteract the shifts being banned. More so, like they're going to probably put shade guys certain which way directions, but that's how it's always been. I mean, I can remember when I played softball and I played second base. I was the shittiest second baseman you'd ever see. But, you know, if there was a righty up there and I knew he wasn't a very good left field hitter or opposite field hitter, I would play damn near on the second base bag in case he tried to rip one up the middle because I wasn't worried about him shooting the hole at second base. So, I mean, it's going to go back to like how it was. You know, they'll have guys who shade him certain directions based off of what pitch is coming. You know, if they're of right-handed hitters up there and they're pitching them low and away, that, you know, the second baseman will probably be a little bit further away from the second base bag, anticipating him, trying to shoot it between first and second. So trying to steal the hit, you know, through the middle. Or if they're beating a guy on the inside of the plate, maybe they'll have him shaded a little bit more up to the second base side and the shortstop more of a true straight up because of where they're trying to hit the ball. But at the same time, them banning the shifts, you know, how many times have you guys watched games, like just like I have, where you've seen where these guys have these shift-beating hits, and if there's a traditional style defense, the ball, it would have been an easy out. Inning any double plays, inning any outs, and the shift hurts them. So the shift doesn't always work either. So a lot of this where they're going to have guys playing where they traditionally played, that's going to help. And I think it might actually help pitchers too, because pitchers for the longest time, you know, they have to pitch to the shift, they have to pitch in certain quadrants of the zone. So now where guys are actually playing where they should play without the shift, you know, maybe pitching philosophies change a little bit more, where they're not trying to pitch to the shift and pitch where their defenders are. You know, they might start pitching guys a little bit differently, and you know, that could change. But at least banning the shift, at least making baseball look how baseball used to look, at least making the pace look how it used to look and used to be, and, you know, encouraging guys to put the ball in play more, not just try to have 3 true outcomes and hit home runs and draw walks. You know, they need to get rid of the Joey Gallo approach. It's okay if you have a singular Joey Gallo. You know, in my lifetime, you had guys like Chris Davis, Chris Carter, the other Chris Davis who played for Oakland and Milwaukee. You know, those were like Mark Reynolds. Those were like your guys that struck out 200 times, but they put the ball in the seats 40 times a year, and you lived with it. But the guys like Placido Polanco and Michael Young, those dudes just don't exist anymore. And it's not good for the game. The fact that, you know, hopefully teams start hitting and running again because, you know, the defenses will be more of a traditional place. You know, you want to go watch a beautiful video, go watch Placido Polanco's, like, career highlights. I have never seen a guy perfect the hit and run like that guy could. That guy at will, if there was a runner at first base, he could shoot that hole between first and second better than any hitter I've ever saw in my entire life. There was no one better at the hit and run than him because he was a kind of a choke-up kind of guy. He didn't hit many home runs, but he was extremely hard to strike out, had an extremely good eye at the plate, amazing hand-eye coordination, and that guy could shoot the ball the other way at will. And I'm hoping that comes back. And I'm hoping that guys start trying to hit the runner over. And I'm hoping that teams start putting on hit and runs again. And it'll be nice to see when guys hit piss missile balls that, you know, look at Ryan Kreidler's first hit the other day, or should have been his first hit the other day. There was a guy standing right behind second base. It's just not, it's not fun to watch this kind of baseball, guys. It's not. I want to see guys be defenders. I want to see guys make plays. I want to see guys see their athleticism. I want to see, you know, balls that are piss missiles 105 off the bat. I don't want to see a softball rover out there. And my last point before I end this video, where people are going to go, well, the guys should learn how to hit the ball the other way. The game has changed so much. Guys throw harder than ever. Breaking balls are nastier than ever. When I was a kid, you knew all the guys that threw 100 miles an hour in the league. That's just not the case anymore. You know, when the Royals did their whole bullpen thing in the early 2000 teens, where they had, you know, Kelvin Herrera and Wade Davis and Greg Holland, they completely changed baseball because they took a team that had a mediocre pitching staff with just enough offense and good defense, and they're like, all we need is 5 innings out of you. And they changed the philosophy of baseball since then. Now everyone throws 100. Now everyone's got nasty breaking balls. The average fastball velocity, I'm going to reference that game I watched in 06. Justin Verlander's throwing 99. The guy they had, the 3 of the Rays players that they had, I think only 2 of them out of the 3 threw 92. It just is not the same game anymore. You don't see the guys who you see. You know, I was watching a game from the 80s the other day, and they're talking about average fastball velocity. This game's like 1989. They're talking like 87 miles an hour is a average fastball velocity. And this is like 1988 or 1989 I was watching the game from. It's not the same game. You know, the guys that threw hard back then, there was only a select few. You know, you had like your Randy Johnsons and your Roger Clemens and your Nolan Ryans and your Dave Steebs and all that stuff and Dave Stewart's. You had a few guys that were definitely pumping it in there. But you didn't have like today, where literally every single bullpen is full of guys that throw 97 to 101. I mean, look at Gregory Soto or just any of these pitchers in the league. Guys like Aroldis Chapman. I mean, these dudes throw so hard, and they're breaking pitches. And the specialization of the game is another thing. These guys are seeing starters twice, and then they see 3 different relievers before the game's over. To have that kind of approach where you're getting guys from the left and right side all throwing mid to upper 90s, breaking balls, you know, they preach this thing called the triangle where you have 2 or 3 pitches that break in like a triangle. So you have, for both sides of the play, you have pitches that break this way and pitches that breaks this way, or they call it crossing it, like the X, for 2 different axes. So pitchers, you know, you tunnel, it's called tunneling, where you throw out of the same arm slot, but your 2 pitches break in opposite directions, so forming like a triangle. It's just not that easy to take the ball the other way. It's just not that easy to be able to deal with these breaking pitches and the velocity uptick and everything. It's just not that easy to have that kind of approach to hit the ball the other way, to beat the shift. It's just not the same game. The athletes and the pitching is just so much better than it's ever been. There is not another time period in MLB history where you have had pitchers of this caliber that throw this hard with this kind of breaking stuff. You've always had a select few in any generation of pitchers that were very nasty and threw hard. There always was. But to have this many and this deep in every single team, it's hard to hit the ball the other way. It's hard to hit in general. Look at the averages in the MLB. This year is one of the lowest. I think like the league average is like in the 230s. And these changes they made, I feel like are extreme positive to making the game how it used to be, how it used to be played, how it used to look, how the pace used to be, and I think it's a positive. You go and you make pitchers throw the ball where they can't sit there and dick around on the mound anymore for 47 seconds in between pitches. You make hitters stay in the box, and you make them get ready to hit. You now get ban the shifts, so now you're going to encourage guys to put the ball in play more, because now all these would-be hits where they're getting sucked up by the shifts because all the perfect placements, you know, now those hits are going to come back. So maybe the launch angle stuff starts to die a little bit because guys can become line drive hitters and get paid that way because they're putting the ball in play. And I feel like you look at like the team like the Cleveland Guardians, where they have so many, they don't have a lot of home runs, but they run, and they're one of the best contact hitting teams, and they're one of the least strikeout prone teams there is. I feel like now that's coming back into favor with the MLB. That's starting to come back into play because this whole 3 true outcomes thing, trying to hit the 3-run homer, not trying to get guys over, not trying to hit and run. You know, you're trying to beat the shift by hitting the ball in the seats. I feel like that's starting to die off. And what the Guardians have done, and now you implement these changes to where you're banning the shift, and guys have to play where they used to play for 100 years, and the defensive linemen are going back to where they used to be, and guys are going to get rewarded for hitting balls, you know, through the infield again. I feel like it's going to change the 3 true outcomes. We're going to see a lot better baseball. We're going to see hit and run. We're going to see more speed in the game again. We're going to start seeing more stolen bases. And we're going to see the game how it used to be, how the pace used to be, how the flow used to be. And I think it's just going to be a much better game than it used to be. So that's all I got for you guys today. That's my thoughts. What's yours? Do you guys like these new rule changes? Do you guys disagree with these rule changes? Do you like the shift? Do you not like the shift? Do you think the pitch clock is good? Do you think the pitch clock is bad? Oh, also one last thing. The whole thing where you only get 3 throwovers before you get a ball, or you get 2, and you got to get them on the third it's a ball. Guys, everyone goes, well, as soon as they throw over twice, the runner is going to be able to steal at will. No, he won't. Because if the guy gets a 75-foot lead because he knows he can't throw it over, all they're going to do is throw it over to first. Eventually, if you get too big of a lead, they'll pick your ass off anyways. So, I don't think that. And also, remember, these changes can be counteracted. It's going to take a couple years before they realize what they did is good or what they did is bad. We'll have to see what the numbers do. So, what are your thoughts? What are your opinions? Let me know in the comments below. Have a good one, guys.